When I was in second grade, my teacher read us a book of fables. One was about an elephant who lost something that was very important to him while bathing in a pond. The details of the story have been lost to me for decades, but the gist of it always stuck with me. Since I don't remember the details, let's say he lost a stone given to him by his late mother. Distraught over the loss, he spent all day searching for it, combing through the water frantically with his trunk before his friend Monkey came along and asked him what he was doing. The elephant, exasperated, told his friend, "I'm looking for my stone and I can't find it. It was given to me by my mom and I don't know what I'll do without it." Monkey said to him, "Well, maybe you can't find it because of all of the ripples in the water. Wouldn't it be easier to see if the water were still?" The elephant, having looked away from the water to talk to his friend, looked back at the pond. It was still again. In seconds, he found his pebble lying atop the silt. Just like the elephant frantically splashing the water in search of his lost stone, many of us go through life in search of what has been lost through trauma and socialization and the over-intellectualizing that we're taught to do in order to be taken seriously as adults. There are many ways to find what has been lost in the proverbial pond, many routes of stillness. Some folks prefer transcendental meditation, or dance, or painting. You don't have to choose just one path, but poetry has been particularly illuminating for me. Poetry is a waking dream state. Poetry is meditation. Poetry is presence. From my own forays into spirituality and mysticism, it's my understanding that we're born into whatever it is that we're meant to work through in our lifetimes. When I think about the writers and poets whose works have spoken deeply to my spirit, they are people who were doing their best to work through their birth into circumstances. When I was younger, that was writers like Zadie Smith and Salman Rushdie. More recently, it's been poets like Tracy K. Smith, Robert Haas, Joy Harjo, and Fatima Asghar. If someone were to encounter my work in the wild, they would probably notice a few things about the circumstances I was born into and through which I'm currently working. I'm a diaspora kid. I have citizenship in one country, Barbados, and existence in another, the US. Growing up in Las Vegas, as psychically bound as I am to this place, it was a very disconnected experience. It was like I was adopted at birth and I couldn't shake the desire to know my birth parents. All of my friends growing up were diaspora kids too, from Samoa and Mexico and Eritrea, the Dominican Republic, and the Philippines and the American South. We didn't know it then, but the common denominator was that we were all these kids living in unchosen exile. In my early 20s, I developed a condition called fibromyalgia. I was in excruciating pain all the time and I didn't know why. This might not be the case for everyone, but for me, I think my pain developed as my body's way of telling me to listen to it. When I started writing personal essays and later poetry, my symptoms began to lessen. I hope that some other person living in exile might come across my work, and instead of falling into the trap of romanticizing the motherland or internalizing the pain of their alienation, they might find peace in exile, if only for a moment. I came to poetry late. I majored in English in college, but I focused on the analytical research side of language arts. I found poetry confusing and, forgive me for saying this, frivolous. It is an art form that requires slowing down and laying down your barriers. Those are two things that I was not used to. It wasn't until I was 25 that it began to click for me. I was at a friend's apartment and she shared a couple of poems with me that she had written in college. It was clear as water and so vivid. It made the hair on my arm stand up. Her poems inspired me to write my own and to send them to her. The poems I sent her were pretty bad, full of cliches and line breaks that made no sense. It was like a person doing an impression of a poet. But her feedback was good and kind, and it taught me a lot about the quiet, meditative beauty of poetry. So if you're like me, and you never learned how to read poetry in school, but you'd like to learn, here are 3 pieces of advice. How to read poetry. 1. Out loud. A lot of us read by skimming. We don't give our full attention to words on pages when we're reading the news or a post on social media. You can't read poetry that way. It requires complete attention. When we read out loud, we force ourselves to be still and to allow the words on the page to fall into their natural pace and prosody. Good poetry is like music without the music. Listen for the music. 2. Read it without trying to get it. People often say about poetry what they say about expressionist art. I don't get it. I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. The poet Amiri Baraka said, "Poetry expresses what cannot be explained." If you can analyze and articulate how a poem makes you feel and the conventions it uses to evoke said feeling, that's lovely. It is by no means a prerequisite. If something moves you or sounds true to your ear, know that that is enough. 3. Read it as if you were in someone else's dream. This kind of goes along with the second one. You don't have to understand your dreams to feel something when you're in them, do you? Dreams are where our minds go to process the mess of daily life. In a dream, you might be wearing someone else's face or driving a car backwards, or your teeth are falling out and turning into pearls. Sometimes it is beneficial to analyze the imagery. Other times it's sufficient to just say, wow, that was strange and startling and vivid, and it reminded me of the magic that is being alive. Poetry reminds us that not all questions have answers, yet there is beauty in the asking. Try to remember the mutilated world. This poem was written in quarantine for a virtual workshop with the poet Gail Brandis. Gail provided participants with a couple of prompts. One of them was to write a poem after Adam Zagajewski's Try to Praise the Mutilated World. What better way to praise the mutilated world than to commit a morsel of it to memory? Try to remember the mutilated world. Remember April's warm pink moon, and all over the lumid, quicksilver blue of the evening's horizon. Remember its eclipsing, tops of concrete buildings flitting in and out of field of vision. Remember how its brief spectacular beauty turned you into a newborn again, all concepts of object permanence thrown out the window easy, a sun-drenched balloon in the wind, asking as a friend to be remembered. The beginning of devotion. I could say that I went through a Mary Oliver phase, but the truth is I go through a Mary Oliver phase every few months. I love that at the foundation of her work is the imperative to see, to pay attention. The title of this poem comes from something she said that has always stuck with me. The beginning of devotion. I could have nicked my head on the shelf if I wasn't careful, and I wasn't. Good things happen sometimes. For instance, birds have choir practice at 7 a.m., and it's their sharp yet merciful harmony that lifts me painlessly into day, every day. And another bird, a humming one, against an imperative shade of blue, sheared clear, naked as a summer calf, even through pale water stains dotting window glass, is playing a game of hopscotch, flapping its wings from bough to invisible bough, showing no sign of worry that a branch could break under its fleeting weight. Good things happen sometimes by just chance, every day, and ask for nothing in return besides attention. There is not so much to do. I wrote this poem one day after a day trip with my husband. We had been sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic for over an hour, but the time didn't matter. We can break any amount of time into discrete increments. 1 hour is 60 minutes, 1 minute is 60 seconds, 1 second is... I don't know what 1 second is. Time and our perception of it, it's pretty magical. There is not so much to do. For Philip. There is not so little time, there is only hours, itemized by space and motion in waves, and every time we live these lives, our attentions shift. This time we touch as if for the first, your heat against my absence of. This time a tree, arching eastward, is yearning, saturated in dew. This time we are not stuck in traffic, just practicing magic together. How else would we explain the way 1 minute cast an hour-long shadow, yet this afternoon flew right past, in one eye and out another, elusive as lucidity? There is not so much to do, there is only very little, drawn taut across infinity. Mojave Desert Sunrise. This poem is pretty self-explanatory. I wanted to capture the feeling of walking out into a warm, sunny day after sitting in a frigid, air-conditioned building for hours. Mojave Desert Sunrise. What do I want? Rock-carved red desert, an arid valley within my pores. To have skin warm with God's laughter, spine stretched high, saluting that orb. Sun on spokes walks as it speaks, slowly, healing, rekindling my core. Gratitude, a wave of stillness, for now I need no more. To make paste. This next poem was inspired by a childhood memory. I had a presentation for school due the next morning, and we were out of glue. My dad, being the Bayesian dad that he is, was like, okay, let's make some paste. It wasn't quite glue, but it was enough to get my paper cutouts to hold onto the poster board. And that's all I'll say about this one. To make paste. We are a piece-together kind of people, crafting permanence out of the temporary. From water and flour we learned to make paste, stirring until the batter was even, a gyre in the hand of a god. A fool would use our glue for food, not knowing hunger the way that we do. Not knowing hunger the way that we do, a fool would use our glue for food, whisking until the batter is smooth like a gyre in the hand of God. With water and flour we learn to make paste, grafting permanence onto the temporary. A people pieced together we dared to be, and so we are, a recipe for making it this far. Evening Light Pantoum. This next poem was written one evening while I was waiting for my husband to pick me up from work. I was sitting at a bench on the cusp of golden hour, and it just came to me all at once. It doesn't happen often, but it was one of those things where I wrote it and I was like, damn, that's good. It's written in the Pantoum form, which is a form with origins in 15th century Malaysia. Pantoums are composed of 4-line stanzas. The second and fourth lines of the first stanza become the first and third lines of the next stanza. The pattern continues until you reach the last line, which is usually the first line repeated. Evening Light Pantoum. Finally, it's evening. Outside's time for everything to soften. Under golden light, filtering away the grain. Time for everything to soften. When holding myself close, filtering away the grain, I feel the future in me dark. When holding myself close and far away my ancestors' collected dreams, I feel the future in me dark in technicolor, holograph of ghost. And far away my ancestors' collected dreams under golden light, in technicolor, holograph of ghost. Finally, it's evening out. Sides. Lilacs. I would like to give a content warning for lilacs, as this poem mentions suicide and police violence. If that is not something you can take in today, please mute this video until the next poem begins. Lilacs. Well into the fallow end of July, new lilacs bloom on the bush just below the apartment, just behind the dumpster, perpetually overflowing with waste, blowing a stench so hot and thick I could taste. Enough to say out loud to no one but myself, okay, the next place will not be tucked behind a dumpster, no. Under other conditions, moving plans are unremarkable, but the conditions under which I am writing are these. Last week I tied a noose out of fabric from my favorite dress and attempted, and a week before that my mother almost died of a heart attack, and a lot of people did die, being strangled by and shot by, that is to say, murdered by, the police. It doesn't have to be the new virus. It could be anything, considering it's been expensive to live for as long as there have been fences, and the rent keeps rising. Yes, under these conditions, few things come as much of a surprise to me as the will to keep living and imagining an apartment far away enough from a dumpster that I can only smell the lilacs. House Rules. This is an older poem written by a former self. As Joan Didion wrote, we are well advised to be on nodding terms with our former selves. That's why I've included it here. House Rules. My belly burns like a hearth, my head is light. I know the feeling well. When Daddy says, "Die no might," just like JJ, poof, I'm out of sight. Quite literally, this is not a poem. I mean, really, is this the life we came here for? This lead on paper, becoming pixels, the cataracts blotting out the light, and me following behind to give the plates a second rinse when her hands miss what her eyes can no longer feel. Real love is mirror neurons, firing like popcorn in a pan. So I'll flip the cap on the kettle corn powder and satisfy our sweet teeth while we still have them real. Love is, I'm doing the best I can with the hand I was dealt. Do not call my bluff. This race thing was shuffled in, you see. I am at least doing my better. We suck on our teeth as we lay down our cards, though this is not the table at which I wanted a seat. And this is not the meal my mother ordered. Please return it, or else I will write a scathing review of this poor excuse of an all-you-can-eat hotel casino country. No faces, no numbers, no aces. On every card is a Rorschach test, and I am drunk on tequila and fatigue, and my grandfather gambled everything away, save for his children's lives, so I will bet against the house like it's my only birthright.